Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to challenge a script that honestly, most of us have been handed since we were old enough to watch our very first Disney movie. We're talking about the allonormative script. That's the deeply ingrained societal assumption that sexual attraction is this mandatory, universal prerequisite for romantic love, and that any successful relationship absolutely must have sex as its foundation. But what happens when we look beyond that rigid playbook? Well, today we are exploring the vast, rich, and incredibly diverse spectrum of asexuality and aromanticism. Here is the roadmap for our explainer today. We're breaking this down into 5 parts: beyond the binary, decoding the ace flag, myths and misconceptions, navigating mixed relationships, and lastly, redefining intimacy. All right, starting off with Section 1, beyond the binary. Let's define the spectrum. So before we can genuinely dive into how these identities and relationships actually function, we really need to equip ourselves with the proper vocabulary. Language totally shapes how we perceive the world, right? To do this, we have to split up a concept that society almost always treats as a package deal. Sexual attraction is an interest or desire for sexual contact with a specific person. Romantic attraction, on the flip side, is the desire for romantic contact or interaction, usually accompanied by strong feelings and wanting to form a romantic partnership. Many folks in the aspec community find it incredibly helpful to separate these two things entirely. You can experience one without the other, both, or neither. This is known as the split attraction model, and it's practically the key to understanding everything else we're going to talk about today. And this brilliantly illustrates the contrast between our rigid societal expectations and actual human diversity. On the left side, we have allosexual and alloromantic. This is the societal default, referring to people who do regularly experience sexual or romantic attraction. Over on the right, we have aspec. This is an umbrella term for the vast spectrum of people who experience little to no attraction. But pay attention to that word, spectrum. It's not a light switch. Under this umbrella, you've got identities like demisexual or demiromantic, where attraction only forms after a super deep emotional bond is established. Or gray-ace, falling somewhere in that gray area between asexual and allosexual. It's just beautifully fluid. Moving right along to Section 2, decoding the ace flag. Symbols matter, don't they? They give communities a visual anchor and a real shared sense of pride. So let's trace the visual evolution of asexual pride. Back in 2002, the Asexual Visibility and Education Network, or AVEN, used a black-bordered triangle created by David J. to represent expanding the Kinsey scale to include asexuality. By 2005, this kind of naturally evolved into a gradient triangle to better represent the whole spectrum of identities. But as the community kept growing, they realized they needed a symbol that wasn't just tied to a single website. Some people suggested a half-filled heart, but aromantic asexuals rightly pointed out, hey, a heart implies romantic attraction, and that doesn't represent us. So fast forward to the summer of 2010, the community actually held a vote, and a user named StandUp created the winning design. Now, what's really fascinating here is the sheer intentionality behind the design. StandUp specifically created this flag with 4 horizontal stripes. Why? Because they wanted it to seamlessly match the aesthetic of other LGBTQ+ pride flags. It was this amazing visual declaration that the aspec community absolutely belongs in the broader queer community. Let's break down exactly what those 4 stripes mean, just as a quick visual mnemonic device for you. The black stripe represents asexuality itself, the lack of sexual attraction. The gray stripe represents the gray area, which includes demisexual and gray-asexual folks. The white stripe represents allosexual partners and the allies who stand with the community. And finally, the purple stripe represents the community as a whole. It's a really powerful banner that manages to hold an incredibly diverse group of experiences together.
Okay, Section 3, myths and misconceptions.
Aspec individuals have to navigate a world that, quite frankly, doesn't always understand them. They constantly confront aphobia and arophobia. And I want to pose this provocative question to you right out of the gate. Are aspec people just broken or robots? It sounds totally absurd when you say it out loud, doesn't it? Yet this is a shockingly common assumption. Society so heavily links our very humanity and our emotions to sexual and romantic desire that lacking them makes some people assume an aspec person is somehow less human or physically broken. But just looking at the lived realities of this community easily debunks these myths. Myth number 1. Oh, you just haven't found the right person yet. The reality? That implies aspec people are somehow incomplete. In truth, aspec folks live incredibly full, vibrant, happy lives without ever needing to conform to standard romantic or sexual norms. Myth number 2. Asexual people hate sex. The reality here is a lot of nuance. While some definitely are sex repulsed, others are sex favorable. They might choose to have sex for emotional closeness, to have kids, or even just out of curiosity. Every single person is completely different. And myth number 3, aromantic people will never get married. Reality? A lot of them do. They might marry for deep platonic love, legal benefits, or companionship. They form incredibly deep connections. They just aren't following the standard societal blueprint. But listen, we can't just look at this academically. We have to ground these concepts in raw human emotion. Look at this quote from an aspec youth. I've had people make fun of or tell me I need medical or mental help after coming out as asexual. This is the real-world, damaging impact of these misconceptions. When society tells you that your baseline existence is some medical problem that needs to be fixed, it causes immense psychological friction. Which brings us to Section 4, navigating mixed relationships. So how do aspec people navigate dating in a world that holds on to all these misconceptions? Well, there's some really fascinating 2024 dissertation data from researcher Chandler Batchelor that reveals exactly how mixed relationships, meaning couples where one partner is asexual and the other is allosexual, actually manage commitment. What Batchelor's research highlights is the immense weight of allonormativity. Early in their lives, usually before fully understanding their aspec identity, many asexual partners feel this crushing pressure to overperform sexuality. Societal scripts are basically screaming at them that to be desirable, to be loved, or to be cared for by an allo partner, they have to act highly sexual. It's this desperate bid to just feel normal, which unfortunately often results in consenting to unwanted sex just to keep the peace. To really highlight how unnatural this feels, Batchelor interviewed an asexual individual named Axel, who candidly shared this. This whole sex thing just felt like an absolute pain in the ass. Axel described the total exhausting frustration of trying to force themselves into the rigid box of traditional expectations, having what they called boring sex that felt like absolutely nothing, just to maintain a relationship, and then literally wandering off to read fan fiction right afterward. It perfectly highlights the futility of forcing an allonormative script onto an aspec experience. So the crucial point is, when the traditional script fails, new ones must be written. Enter queer platonic relationships, or QPRs. A QPR is a committed, intimate relationship that is not romantic in nature, but entirely defies conventional friendship expectations. Partners in a QPR might live together, buy a house, raise kids, or even platonically marry. It is a deeply fulfilling, entirely valid alternative to standard romantic and sexual structures. And it definitively proves that commitment does not require romance. And finally, Section 5, redefining intimacy. If an ace and an allo person throw out the societal playbook, how do they actually build their life together? How does an allosexual person who experiences sexual attraction co-construct a relationship with an asexual person who doesn't? To understand this, Batchelor's research draws on scholar Ela Prebelow's concept of erotics. Now, don't let that word confuse you. In this specific context, erotic simply means intimacy decentralized from sex. It reframes sex as just one potential activity on a massive menu of options, rather than the absolute make-or-break foundation of the whole relationship. It's about deeply sharing any pursuit with another person. When sex is decentered, infinite possibilities for connection suddenly open up. So what does this actually look like out in the real world? Batchelor's study highlights some incredible, specific examples of couples forging deep connections entirely outside the traditional realm of sex. One couple, Erland and Kia, use live-action roleplay, or LARP, to experience romance in another universe, learning about each other through their characters. Axel and their partner Whiskey literally created an intimacy spreadsheet to transparently track what non-physical or adjacent activities they both enjoy. Another couple engages in parallel gaming, literally just existing in the same room, comfortably doing their own thing. And others find profound intimacy simply in sharing a bed and cuddling until they fall asleep, with the explicit, comforting boundary that sex is never going to be an expectation. Let's move to and see how this all builds into practical advice. If you are navigating an ace/allo relationship, or hey, if you're a therapist helping a couple, here is the blueprint for success, derived right from the research. Step 1. Dispel those allonormative myths. We have to stop assuming a lack of sex means a lack of love. Step 2. Open, radically transparent communication. Do not assume your partner's boundaries. Ask them and fully accept them. Step 3. Find those shared non-sexual activities, your own erotics. Co-construct your intimacy intentionally, rather than just passively relying on society's default settings. Which leaves us with this final thought. The lessons from the ASPAC community aren't just for asexual or aromantic individuals. Honestly, they are a masterclass in intentional relationship building for all of us. Whether you are ace, allo, or anywhere in between, ask yourself, if we strip away society's rigid scripts, what new forms of intimacy could we all intentionally co-construct? Imagine the freedom in defining your relationships exactly as you want them to be without the constant pressure of what they're supposed to look like. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning the script, and I'll see you next time.